Hi Year 5s and welcome to our new unit. So this week we're going to be exploring the prologue of The Nowhere Emporium by Ross Mackenzie. And by the end of the week we will be writing our own version of an adventure prologue based on The Nowhere Emporium. So, a prologue is a text which gives us some background information about the main story. So, it gives the reader a little bit of an overview about what is about to happen next. So, let's have a think about these questions here. What is an emporium? What do you think the story will be about? And what genre of story does this text belong to, do you think? So, you're going to be making some predictions if you haven't read the story before, and you're going to think about these sentence starters here. So, what do you think? Who do you think the main characters might be? Um, do you think the story might be a bit about magic? Why? And where do you think the story may be set in? So, pause the video and answer those questions there. Right, so an emporium is a shop. And when I looked at these images, I thought, well, the story would probably be about magic, especially based on the picture on the right there. You can see there's almost sort of sparkles in the picture that makes me think it's quite magical. It's quite a strange shop, isn't it? I can see there's lots of strange artifacts there, and it almost looks as if it could take you into another world. And so that puts the genre of this story into fantasy. Now, if I think about who the main characters might be, I'm wondering who might own this sort of shop. I can imagine it to be perhaps a person who is a magician, maybe, or somebody who's maybe a wizard or something like that. It's almost got sort of like a Harry Potter vibe to it as well, hasn't it? So think about the main characters and what do you think these main characters might learn from this story. So, in today's session, we're going to be looking at interpreting a text, that means making meaning from it, and we are going to be looking at gathering vocabulary for our own prologue. So, as we read through this page here, can you find any words or phrases that create a sense of wonder? So, as I'm reading through, write down some words or phrases that create a sense of wonder. The shop from nowhere arrived with the dawn on a crisp November morning. Word travelled quickly around the village, and by midday the place was abuzz with rumour and hearsay. There were 4 shops in the row yesterday. Today there are 5. Did you hear it sits between the butcher's and the ironmonger's? The brickwork is black as midnight, and it sparkles strangely in the light. By evening time, a curious crowd had begun to gather around the mysterious building. They jostled for position and traded strange and wonderful theories about where the shop had come from. So, did you find any words or phrases that create a sense of wonder? Well, I thought the place was abuzz with rumour creates a sense of wonder, doesn't it? It gives the impression that that the crowd are gossiping and are in awe at this new sight. And then the author also uses snippets of conversation, doesn't he? Snippets of dialogue. There were 4 shops in the road. Today there are 5. So it really gives a sense that the crowd are gossiping, and there's a lot of energy and curiosity about this shop. And then in the last paragraph, he uses some alliteration there, doesn't he? A curious crowd had begun to gather around the mysterious building. This time, we're going to have a look to see if we can find any words or phrases that indicate that the shop is not ordinary. So, what do you notice as we read through this piece of text here? And there is a description of smell as well. What does that description of smell tell us about the shop? They gathered around and talked about what they might sell, all the while hoping to catch a glimpse of movement through the darkened windows. The shop was indeed built from bricks the colour of midnight, bricks that shimmered and sparkled under the glow of the gas street lamps. Blocking the doorway was a golden gate so fine and intricate that some wondrous spider might have spun it. Over the windows, curling letters spelled out a name, the Nowhere Emporium. There was a glimmer of movement in the entranceway, and a ripple of excitement passed through the crowd. And then silence fell, a silence so deep and heavy that it seemed to hang in the atmosphere like mist. The shop's door swung open. The fine golden gate turned to dust, scattering in the wind. The air was suddenly alive with hundreds of scents. The perfume of toasted coconut and baking bread, of salty sea air and freshly fallen rain, of bonfires and melting ice. So, what do you notice about this description? What words tell us that the shop is not ordinary? Well, the description of the bricks being the colour of midnight, that they shimmer, um, that they sparkle under the glow of the gas street lamps. So the gas street lights would have meant that the lamps would have been flickering, so there would have been a flame in there. And then also there's a description of the golden gate, fine and intricate, like a wondrous spider might have spun it. So that tells us that it's not ordinary, doesn't it? And then there is at the end, in the end paragraph, there is a description of the strange smells or perfumes that are coming out this shop. And if you notice, they're coming out in opposites, such as the salty sea air and freshly fallen rain. They're two sort of different smells, aren't they? Bonfires and melting ice. So the way that the author has used opposites there really makes us begin to wonder, well, what is it that that the shopkeeper is selling? So what is the what is inside this strange shop? See if you can answer those questions there on the side as we read through the next page. A dove emerged from the darkness of the shop and soared through the air, wings flashing white in the blackness. The enchanted crowd watched as it climbed until it was lost to the night, and then as one they gasped. The black sky exploded with light and colour, and a message in dazzling fireworks, sparks, and shimmers spelled out, "The Nowhere Emporium is open for business. Bring your imagination." The writing hung in the air just long enough for everyone to read it, and then the words began falling to the ground, a rain of golden light. The crowd laughed in delight, reaching out to catch the sparks as they fell. Everybody who'd gathered inside the Emporium was entranced. No one had ever seen a spectacle such as this. One by one they walked forward, touched the sparkling black brickwork, examined the tips of their fingers, and then they stepped through the door to find out what was waiting. What do you think might be waiting? So, what does the word gasp tell us about how the crowd were feeling? Well, if you're gasping, then it means that you're in amazement, doesn't it? You're lost for words. Why do you think that the crowd wanted to touch the sparkling black brickwork? Well, they seem to be amazed by it, don't they? They want to touch the brickwork um, and to see perhaps what it's made out of, or um, why it's sparkling. So they're really intrigued by it, aren't they? Or perhaps it might be to be with something about bringing your imagination. So maybe they're actually bringing their imagination to the brickwork. Right, what do you think happened to the Emporium? Think about that as we read through the next section. 2 days later, when the shop had vanished, a stranger arrived in the village. He was polite and he paid for his room with stiff new banknotes. But something about him, his startling height perhaps, or the hungry look in his cold blue eyes, troubled the villagers. He asked questions about a shop built from midnight bricks, but the tall man couldn't find a single person in the village who could recall the Emporium. Within a day, he too was gone, and all trace of these strange events faded from the history of the place. Those who'd walked through the Emporium's doors had no memory of anything they might have seen inside. More importantly, none of them recalled the price of admission, the little pieces of themselves they'd given for a glimpse at the Emporium's hidden secrets and wonders. Bring your imagination, the sign in the sky had requested. So, what do you think has happened to the Emporium? And why is it that people have no memory of what they had seen inside this strange shop? Perhaps it might have been something to do with when they touched the bricks. And then we have this question here. Why do you think that the author has chosen to set the prologue during a frosty November? Pause the video now and answer that question. So we could say that the author has used pathetic fallacy. In this case, the weather, the cold and icy environment, emphasises how the crowds were longing for something magical and out of the ordinary to happen. So the fact that it's set in a cold and perhaps a little bit lonely, icy morning um, really reflects what when the magic shop does arrive, then it brings everybody together, doesn't it? So it creates, really emphasises the magic. So thinking about setting the scene, let's see if we can now gather some words to use in our prologue. So let's have a look at this scene here. How could you describe the sky? So think about the colours, think about what you can see. What vocabulary could you use to describe the sky on a crisp November morning? So here are some words that I have got. Frostbitten, ice blue hue. So it's almost got like an icy blue tinge to it almost, hasn't it? Wispy snow clouds, the pallid rays of winter sun. So something which is pallid is not very strong. So that means that the rays of the winter sun aren't very strong, are they? Because it's very cold. And then you've got the hazy grey clouds. You could almost call them smoky, couldn't you? Smoky grey. How could we now describe the frosty street? Again, what can you see and how could you describe it? So the street's cobbled, isn't it? You could talk about the sludgy snow, talk about the buildings perhaps. Write down some words now to describe the street. And this is what I have got. I've got slippery ice, sludgy, cobbled, treacherous. It's quite dangerous to walk on it, isn't it? It's like an ice rink. Glistening. You could talk about the glistening icicles hanging from the pipes or from the windows, the snow-capped roofs. And we could talk about the street being lined with stone or even brick houses. And let's see if we can use some personification. So we spoke about the street lamps, and now in these old-fashioned street lamps would have been lit, and there would have been a flame flickering inside the lamp there. So how could we use personification to describe the street lamps? Do that now on your piece of paper. So I described the street lamps as old and flickering and standing to attention. Perhaps you could describe them as blinking even. So your task for today will be to write the opening paragraph of our prologue. And you can see I've put some sentence starters on the right there. And I'm really thinking about that pathetic fallacy. Remember, I want to create a lonely scene to really emphasize that something magical is going to happen. So that when it does happen, it really brings the crowds together, doesn't it? On this crisp November morning, the ice blue hue reflected from the sky above the rooftops and onto the frostbitten street below. In the distance, a solitary street lamp stood blinking, casting a light on the glistening scene. So it's cold and silent, and then all of a sudden, the mysterious shop arrives. So, can you create a scene which is cold, lonely, and just giving a hint that something magical is about to happen? As I've put there, the glistening scene, something magical is about to happen. So have a go with it. See if you can use some of those sentence starters on the right there. See if you can use some personification to describe your street lamp and the vocabulary that you have gathered to talk about the sky and the street. And I look forward to seeing your work.